He greeted me at the door with that same boyish smile he's had since childhood. My son, always eager to impress. It had been a while since we'd seen each other. His new place was spotless, almost sterile, but I smiled and praised it anyway. He beamed like a teenager and pulled me inside. I noticed him glance at the time, habit probably. Always working. Then, he introduced me to his colleague. Evan. Younger than my son, taller, more self-assured. He had an ease about him, a quiet charm that came off as effortless. He helped me finish the last bit of the presentation, my son explained. Didn't want to leave you alone while I run out. Evan extended his hand. Pleasure, ma'am. His voice was calm, warm, almost too warm. I smiled and nodded, but something in me tugged, instinct, maybe, or intuition honed by solitude. I brushed it off. We all sat for tea. The conversation was light, casual. Evan made jokes, and my son laughed louder than usual. It made me proud. For a second, I saw my husband's posture in our son, the way he leaned forward when he was excited. That memory caught me off guard. I sipped my tea to ground myself. I need to head into the office for a bit, my son said eventually, apologetic. Just an hour. Evan said he'd stay, if that's okay. Of course it was. I smiled and waved him off. The door closed behind him with a soft click. Silence settled quickly. Evan refilled my cup without asking. You raised a good man, he said. It felt genuine, but too deliberate. I thanked him, choosing my words carefully. He's always been kind. I can see that, Evan said, then added quietly. Kindness runs in the family. I almost didn't react. Almost. But I looked up, and he was watching me. Not in a casual way, not in the innocent way younger men often look at older women, out of curiosity or politeness. There was weight in his gaze, something both flattering and inappropriate. I turned the conversation to neutral ground. Work, weather, the city. He followed, but only briefly. You've got a calm about you, he said. Rare these days. I replied with a soft laugh, brushing it off again. But something inside flickered. It wasn't attraction. At least not yet. It was recognition. Someone saw me. The hour hadn't even begun, but I felt the shift. He wasn't just being polite. I sensed it in the way he leaned in, how his compliments were just vague enough to avoid guilt, but specific enough to land. It had been years since anyone looked at me like that. Years since I cared if they did. I should have stood, made an excuse, checked the oven, called a friend. But I didn't. I stayed and I listened, and I noticed how quiet the apartment was, how even the clock seemed to tick louder when my son wasn't there. He asked me about my husband, not casually, but as though he already knew I carried him like a hidden photograph in my pocket. I told him we were married for 29 years, that he passed 3 years ago, that it still hurts in places no one sees. Evan didn't interrupt. He let the silence stretch before he spoke again. He must have been a strong man to earn that kind of devotion. There was no smirk, no clever follow-up. Just the words. I nodded, unsure how to respond to a stranger honoring a man he never knew. I hope I have something like that one day, he added. I looked at him, then really looked. He wasn't just charming. He was deliberate. Every word was placed like a brick in something he was quietly building. He shifted slightly closer on the couch. Not enough to alarm, just enough to close space. I became hyper-aware of things I hadn't noticed before. His cologne. The way his sleeves were rolled, showing forearms that carried quiet confidence. I shouldn't have been noticing, but I was. And he knew. He asked about my interests, what I liked to read, how I spent my time alone. I found myself answering with more detail than I usually shared. Not because I wanted to impress, but because he asked in a way that made me feel interesting again. Not invisible. He didn't talk about himself much, only offered pieces, his love for jazz, that he never liked coffee, that he thought silence was underrated. Each thing made him seem older than his age, more measured. Or maybe he was just saying what he knew I'd respond to. Either way, it worked. He reached over to hand me a coaster when I placed my cup down, and his fingers brushed mine. Light, accidental, but it lingered a heartbeat too long. I should have pulled back. I didn't. I looked at him, and he held my gaze, calm, confident, and waiting. Not pushing. Just waiting. My mind ran through every rational reason this was wrong. My son. The age difference. The sheer absurdity of it. But underneath that rational layer was something louder. I felt desired. Not politely complimented, not praised for aging gracefully, but truly, presently wanted. "You have beautiful hands," he said softly, as though testing a boundary. I didn't speak. The words landed like a match on dry paper. Small, contained, but fire, nonetheless. I stood up, walked a few steps toward the kitchen, unsure why. Maybe to put space between us, maybe just to breathe. He followed, slowly, deliberately. No words now. Just energy, thick in the air, shifting the room's weight. I turned to face him. There was a moment, 1 second, where I could have stepped back, said something polite, redirected. But I didn't. Neither did he. He didn't touch me. Not yet. But everything between us had already changed. He looked at me like I was something fragile he didn't want to break, but couldn't stop approaching. I hated how much that look stirred me. I hated how long it had been since I felt like I was still capable of being seen this way. And yet, I didn't step away. "You don't have to say anything," he said, his voice lower, almost reverent. "I just want to be here." That kind of sentence should have made me retreat. Instead, I stood there, heart racing, letting the silence between us close whatever distance words couldn't. He moved closer, slowly, as if giving me time to protest. I didn't. I couldn't. When his hand touched my arm, it wasn't possessive. It was cautious, almost asking permission. My breath caught. My eyes stayed on his. I wasn't confused. I wasn't unsure. I was drowning in a feeling I thought had died with my husband. His fingers trailed up my arm with the lightness of someone who understands gravity in other people's lives. I felt my resistance crumbling, not from weakness but from exhaustion, of being strong, composed, appropriate. In that moment, I wasn't my son's mother, or a widow, or a guest. I was just a woman being touched by someone who knew how. He didn't kiss me right away. That would have been too easy, too cliché. Instead, he spoke just above a whisper. "This moment, it doesn't have to mean anything, but it feels like it does." I closed my eyes, not because I wanted to imagine someone else, but because I didn't want to see myself making this decision. Then it happened. Quietly. Slowly. No urgency. No demand. Just two people collapsing into a need they couldn't name, but both understood. It wasn't passion in the usual sense. It was something lonelier, softer. Not a spark, but a fading flame catching wind for the first time in years. The room didn't feel like a room anymore. It felt like a pause in time, suspended and surreal. Every sensation was sharpened. The warmth of his skin, the way his breath matched mine, the tremble in my hands. I should have felt shame, but I didn't. Not in that second. I thought of my husband, not to compare, but to remember what being wanted used to feel like. I thought of my son, and quickly pushed the thought away before it could poison everything. This wasn't about betrayal. It was about momentary escape. We didn't say anything after. There were no promises. No apologies. We sat there, not touching, both aware that the hour was almost up. The silence returned, but it was different now. Heavy. Final. Then the sound came, the click of the front door. My stomach dropped. My body stiffened. He stood up calmly, adjusted his shirt, walked toward the hallway as if nothing had happened. I stayed seated, unable to move, feeling the weight of every second he'd used. My son walked in with a bag of takeout and a tired smile, completely unaware. I managed a greeting, my voice too steady to be real. Evan took the food from him, laughed at something he said, and acted as if the last hour hadn't existed. He didn't look at me. Not once. That was the first sign. Dinner was quiet. My son talked about a potential promotion, his boss's annoying habits, something about next quarter's targets. I nodded, added the occasional response. I couldn't follow most of it. My mind was still in the silence we'd shared, in the way Evan's hand had held mine like he'd known me longer than a few hours. I glanced at Evan once, just to see. He met my eyes for half a second, then looked away like I wasn't even in the room. A coldness had settled where there had been heat. I thought I understood what this was, but that moment told me everything. It wasn't connection. It was convenience. He took the hour he was given, used every second, and then stepped right back into the version of himself that fit cleanly into the rest of the world. My son asked if everything was okay. I smiled too quickly, told him the tea was lovely, the apartment charming, the evening perfect. All lies. Or maybe just deflections. It felt wrong to speak the truth in a house where trust was supposed to live. I left the next morning. Evan wasn't there when I came downstairs. My son hugged me, told me he was proud of me, how grateful he was that we spent time together. I held on to him a little longer than usual. He didn't ask why. On the train home, I sat by the window and replayed everything. Not the physical part, that faded quickly, but the look he gave me before it all began. That unspoken dare. That quiet lure. And my decision to say yes without ever saying it aloud. I didn't feel like a victim. That would have been easier. I wasn't seduced, manipulated, or tricked. I made a choice in a moment where I was seen and wanted. The mistake wasn't in the act. It was in thinking it meant something more. No one will ever know. I'll carry it like so many other things, folded up neatly and stored away in the part of me I don't let the world see. I don't regret it, but I don't cherish it either. It exists now, and that's enough. What I keep hearing over and over is that sound, the door clicking shut as my son left, the sound of trust leaving the room, and the echo of Evan's voice when he said, "This doesn't have to mean anything." He was right. It didn't have to, but it did. He used every second my son gave us. And I let him.